Homage to the original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. Today, in the Dhammapada, we come to a difficult topic to discuss, the issue of sexuality. The verse says, just like a poorly thatched roof, the rain will penetrate. Likewise, an untamed mind will be penetrated by desire. On the other hand, just as a well-thatched roof keeps the rain out, a well-trained mind keeps desire from entering. This verse relates to inner cultivation, especially the arising of lustful thoughts. The story is connected with Prince Nanda, the younger brother of the Buddha. After the Buddha attained enlightenment, he brought the Dharma to King Bimbisara and the people of the kingdom of Magadha. The king offered the Buddha the bamboo grove monastery, Velluvana. Before his enlightenment, the Buddha went through various stages of seeking enlightenment, practicing with the teachers Kalama and Uddaka Dhammapada, and then practicing austerities for 6 years without success. Later, he returned to the path of meditation and attained enlightenment by the Naranjana river. After his enlightenment, the Buddha returned to Rajagaha and converted King Bimbisara, which caused great excitement throughout the kingdom of Magadha. King Suddhodana, the Buddha's father, in a distant land, followed his son's progress with pride when he learned that the Buddha had become enlightened and had gained the allegiance of an entire empire. News of him spread far and wide, and King Suddhodana sent a delegation to invite the Buddha to visit his homeland. However, when the delegation arrived to meet him, they could only bow down before the Buddha and wait in silence. When the Buddha finished his sermon, they suddenly realized the miraculous truth: one's true homeland is not the place of birth, but the place of enlightenment and peace. Immediately, the members of the delegation realized that they no longer needed to return to their homeland, as enlightenment was now their true homeland. They decided to stay and follow the Buddha's path. And from that moment on, all thoughts of their old homeland vanished. King Suddhodana repeatedly sent delegations to invite the Buddha to visit his homeland. But each time the delegation came, they sat in silence listening to the Buddha's teachings and then no longer wished to return. The members of the delegation realized that once they were enlightened, they were no longer attached to the world, no longer longing for their old homeland. On one occasion, when a new delegation was sent, a high-ranking official, a man of great diplomacy and conflict resolution, could not resist the pull of the Buddha's teachings. After hearing the sermon, he realized that he too could not return to his old role. Even the people sent to invite the Buddha ultimately attained enlightenment and no longer had thoughts of their old homeland. King Suddhodana, still waiting for his son to return, gradually came to understand the greatness of the Buddha's teachings and the impermanence of all worldly things. Princess Yasodhara, the Buddha's wife, along with everyone in the royal palace, could not forget the image of the Buddha. But they also understood that only enlightenment was the true place of peace. When the Buddha taught, the people and even the delegations who came to invite him wept, realizing that only through enlightenment could one truly understand the meaning of home and peace. In the end, the Buddha agreed to return to his homeland, because he realized that everyone had united in understanding and was ready to receive the Dharma. Before the Buddha agreed to return to visit his homeland, Prince Nanda, his younger brother, was preparing for his wedding. This caused some surprise, as people often thought that Prince Nanda was much older than the Buddha. However, in reality, Prince Nanda was born just 7 days after the Buddha. King Suddhodana had married 2 sisters, Queen Maya and Lady Suvati. Queen Maya gave birth to the Buddha, while Lady Suvati gave birth to Prince Nanda. The 2 brothers grew up together in close companionship. But the wisdom of Siddhartha, the Buddha, far surpassed that of Nanda. As they grew older, Nanda often felt inferior compared to his older brother, the Buddha. Despite their deep brotherly affection, Nanda always felt overwhelmed by the greatness of the Buddha. His respect for his brother was boundless. And when the Buddha left the palace to become a monk, Nanda experienced a great sense of loss. When the Buddha returned to visit his homeland, at the time Prince Nanda was preparing for his wedding, a special event occurred. Nanda's wedding took place at the same time as the Buddha's visit, creating a festive atmosphere in the city of Kapilavastu. However, when the Buddha appeared, everything changed. He did not enter the city to ask for alms or to partake in a meal, but rather to deliver a sermon. During that sermon, many people, including some of the Buddha's relatives, attained insight. Among them was King Suddhodana, the Buddha's father, who attained the state of a saint. On that day, while preparations for Prince Nanda's wedding were in full swing, the bride was ready. Flowers and lights were hung everywhere, and everyone was busy preparing food and making arrangements for the celebration. Prince Nanda was walking around, overseeing the work, checking in with the guests, and worrying about every little detail. Meanwhile, the Buddha was out on alms round. His bowl was full, and he entered the hall where the wedding was being held. When Prince Nanda saw the Buddha entering, he quickly took the Buddha's alms bowl and tried to carry it himself. The Buddha said nothing but quietly turned and began walking away. Prince Nanda followed him, his eyes still fixed on the Buddha, deeply anxious and wondering if the Buddha would stop. However, the Buddha did not stop. Prince Nanda continued to follow, too respectful to speak, merely observing the Buddha with deep reverence. Finally, when they reached the monastery, the Buddha sat down to rest and then turned to ask Prince Nanda, "Would you like to ordain as a monk?" Overcome with respect for the Buddha, Prince Nanda could not answer immediately. He could only stammer, "Yes." This story reflects the profound feelings of reverence Prince Nanda had for the Buddha, a respect so deep that it could not be expressed in words. This admiration kept him from taking his eyes off the Buddha, even though his wedding was waiting behind him. When the Buddha returned to ask Prince Nanda about ordination, Nanda's wedding was suddenly called off. In the blink of an eye, Prince Nanda went from being a prince about to marry to becoming a monk. The entire royal court was stunned by his decision. Nanda's bride was heartbroken, while he sat in meditation, trying to forget his yearning for her. However, no matter how much he meditated or looked to the world, he could not shake the image of his bride. He felt so tormented that he thought death would be easier than living with this longing. Seeing Nanda's suffering, the Buddha used his divine powers to take him to the heavenly realm. On the way, as Nanda looked down at the earthly realm, he saw a monkey whose fur had been burned in a forest fire. This sight made him realize that the things he loved were also impermanent and not worth clinging to. Upon reaching the heavenly realm, Nanda beheld the beauty of the celestial beings and realized that the beauty there was unlike anything of the worldly kind. What he had once considered important suddenly seemed insignificant. When they returned to the monastery, the Buddha asked Nanda if he still remembered his bride. At this point, Nanda had realized that, compared to the heavenly maidens in the celestial realm, the beauty of his former bride was like the monkey in the forest, something not worth remembering. The Buddha advised Nanda that if he practiced diligently, not only would he surpass the beauty of the worldly beauties, but he would also attain an eternal beauty in the heavenly realms. This reassured Nanda, and he began to earnestly follow the path of practice. The fleeting nature of earthly love became clear to him. The Buddha used the image of celestial maidens in the heavenly realms to help Nanda understand that worldly beauty is temporary. When he saw the celestial maidens, what he once cherished suddenly seemed trivial, and his worldly desires began to fade. True value, the Buddha explained, lies in spiritual cultivation and virtuous conduct. The Buddha taught Nanda the teachings of the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and meditation techniques. Nanda, having grown up in the royal palace, had practiced physical exercises like Qigong and yoga, which made his body and mind strong and flexible. Combined with his past merits and the diligent practice of the Dharma, Nanda ultimately attained the state of an arahant. The Buddha used the metaphor of rain and a roof to explain the control of sensual desires in spiritual practice. The rain symbolizes sensual desires, while the roof represents steadfast practice, which prevents these rains from penetrating. When our minds are firm and we practice correctly, sensual desires cannot invade our inner being, just as a solid roof keeps the rain from seeping in. In life, sensual desires are not like a temporary rain, but rather a continuous rain that never ceases, lasting a lifetime. They are a natural instinct inherent in human beings, like the rain that falls year-round without stopping. If we do not have the wisdom to guard our hearts, sensual desires will dominate our minds. The Buddha also pointed out that sensual desire is not only related to thoughts but is also tied to the biological instincts of men and women, determined by the structure of their bodies and cells. When a man stands near a woman, the difference in their bioelectricity creates a distinct sensation, even if they do not intend to. Therefore, to keep our minds steady, we must continuously cultivate wisdom and control our thoughts. If not, sensual desires will take over our souls. And that is the greatest challenge in our spiritual journey. Animals live entirely by instinct, without the capacity for thinking or cultivating the mind. In contrast, humans possess intelligence and morality, enabling them to use reason and ethical teachings to master themselves and overcome the temptations of sensual desires. Without moral teachings to guide the soul, humans can fall into a state similar to animals, living by instinct without purpose or deeper meaning. Buddhism explains that sensual desire, or sexual instinct, has four origins. 1. Internal physiology. Sensual desire arises from the biological instincts, which nature has endowed to living beings to preserve the species. 2. External environment. External factors, such as exposure to images, sounds, or seduction, can stimulate sexual desire. 3. Karma from past lives. Actions in past lives can strongly influence the present, causing some individuals to be more prone to sensual desires than others. 4. Pride of the ego. When one feels superior to others, indulging in arrogance, sensual desire easily arises in the mind. We can see that sensual desire is not only a biological instinct but also a result of past karma and a mindset of pride and arrogance. In contrast, animals lack this control. They live entirely by instinct without the ability to think or follow moral principles. Therefore, to live a meaningful life and not be dominated by sensual desires, humans must cultivate moral teachings, preserve the mind, and practice diligently. If we fail to do so, we will fall into an unconscious state, similar to animals, living according to instinct without understanding or clear purpose. For those who are stressed or mentally exhausted, sexual desire can arise without reason due to the mental energy rising. If one can calm this energy and focus on keeping the mind empty and pure, they will not be overwhelmed by sexual cravings. This is why monks and those who have renounced worldly life can be unaffected by sexual desires. They follow the correct methods of practice and have inner peace. Another cause is pride, which can fuel the growth of sexual desire. In our brain, the sexual organs are connected to a central part of the brain located at the top of the head. If this center is disturbed, sexual desire will be heightened. What can trigger this part of the brain? The answer is pride. If someone always thinks they are superior to others, feels proud of their success, and believes that everything they achieve is due to their own abilities. They are certain to be driven by sexual desires and fall into moral decay. We must practice humility very carefully. Once, a layperson asked us how to prevent sexual cravings. We replied, "See yourself as dust and dirt, as grass and rubbish." The next time we met, they said, "Master, your method is very effective." It stopped immediately. If we combine the mindset of humility, meditate correctly, focus on our lower abdomen, dantian, and practice qigong properly, while also spreading the Dharma to others, we will accumulate merits and gain the proper methods in medicine, physiology, and psychology. In doing so, we can protect our souls. When encountering someone who always criticizes others, we can be sure that person will ultimately fall. When we indulge in sexual pleasures, we lose the blessings of peace and joy in meditation. We cannot find the tranquility of someone who has entered deep meditation. Therefore, we must eliminate desire. Be firm in our resolve. But how can those who practice the path have the strength to choose the path of liberation? Because even monks and nuns are human. They need to firmly choose the path of liberation and eliminate sensual desires. First and foremost, one must have an absolute ideal. Sexual desire is constant, and without an absolute ideal, one will be swept away by it. But how can one have such an ideal? It is essential to understand the meaning of liberation. However, understanding the meaning of liberation is not easy. It may take a lifetime of learning without truly comprehending it. Secondly, when we have absolute reverence for the Buddha, we gain the strength to overcome sensual desires. For those practitioners who have an absolute ideal of liberation and high determination, only then will they have the inner strength to guard their hearts from being invaded. If the ideal is vague, the roof of the soul is like a temporary thatched roof, always with gaps that allow rain to seep in. At that point, we will see our soul being flooded, losing its direction. A practitioner must have a strong ideal of liberation, and every day, they must practice, reverence the enlightened beings who have attained absolute liberation, and sit in meditation to master their inner world, controlling every thought. When the thought of desire arises, one must recognize it immediately and eradicate it. Advanced practitioners do not let the thought of desire arise, while beginners need daily practice to overcome it. If we do not know our inner world and do not practice every day, we are merely covering up our minds with external forms. When the thought of desire arises, we will not recognize it. And by the time we do, our hearts will have already been invaded. Whether a monk or a layperson, we must all recognize that sensual desire is a debt, a burden, a shadow, something unnatural, sinful, and degrading. Do not think of sexual desire as something normal or natural, because it will lead us down the path of degradation. When someone has the ideal of liberation, they must be determined to eliminate desire from their hearts. A practitioner must completely eradicate desire to live a pure life for themselves and for the monastic community. Lay people must also regulate their sensual desires to create a healthy and wholesome life for society. Both are equally important. Today, we have discussed a difficult and uncomfortable topic. But this is the time for Buddhism to speak out and take action. Every Buddhist must participate in protecting this world, making the earth a pure and wholesome place, like a paradise on earth. We must set an example for future generations and always remember that each person has a responsibility to protect society from harmful influences. Here are 4 questions we should ask ourselves and keep in mind, so that we can strive every day. 1. Our bodies may be a pit of mire, but why can't our minds become precious gems? 2. Why do we remain immersed in trivial things, without seeking the truth? 3. why can't we become better people every day? 4. Ask yourself, why can't we build a better world starting from within ourselves? Ask these questions daily to encourage yourself to strive and improve. May all of us, as Buddhists, become knights, those who fight for the goodness of this world. Homage to the original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha.